Welcome everybody to our webinar entitled Digital Transformation, Stakeholder Management, Collaboration and Leadership. This is our third webinar series where we've been talking about digital change and the people-based approach to that. I'm delighted again to have Simon, Nori and Nicola with me as we talk through this really quite interesting and revealing topic. We are going to be recording the webinar. Two reasons. One, it helps us to improve our presentations and our webinars in the future. And secondly, any of you that or people who weren't able to attend, we can put up the recording and make it available for everybody across social media channels. We would like you to actively participate during our webinar. So I think most people are familiar with the chat function in Zoom. If you have any burning question, please use that function so that either myself, Nicola or Simon can pick up the question. Even though we might be presenting, they'll be able to pick it up and give it to the relevant person to give you direct input. And there will be a couple of opportunities through Slido where we'll be asking for your inputs. And so to make this a little bit more interactive as we go along. So let's just dive into the agenda. As I said, this is our third webinar in the series, and we're going to just quickly introduce ourselves, just a little bit about our background and why we're here, and importantly, sharing some of our experience from a lot of the engagements that we've been working on over the years. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro to digital and how does digital fit into business transformation, why technology is now so important, and some survey results around some of the things we hear around digital and cultural change, and actually ask for your input around what you think are the key inhibitors around digital change and transformation. We will then just a little bit of an intro on the three areas we're covering, and then we're going to get. I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who's going to talk about leadership. Simon will be talking about collaboration and the anchors and engines. I'll finish off with stakeholder ecosystems, and then Nicola is going to share with us a blueprint around digital transformation, and I've got a little snippet about experiential learning and a digital platform that's come to market that's really helping organizations on their journeys. I have people joining as we speak, so I'm admitting people as I go along, so please bear with me as that happens.
Multitasking called it.
Yes, that's many balls in the air at the same time. And Simon and Nicola, please shout out if I accidentally mute you. Sorry. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'll more people coming in, so excuse me while I quickly do that. 25 plus years in business and IT. I've worked in industry, I've worked in management consultancies, I've actually built a management consultancy practice, and I've done a number of technology and digital interim assignments over the last 4 or 5 years. As you can see, there's a number of brands that I've worked with and for. Actually, Simon put this slide together for me, and it's interesting when somebody writes something about you, it sort of highlights areas that you would normally promote yourself on, but as you can see, a seasoned C-suite experience. I talk a lot, I speak a lot. I've done something like 15 webinars in about 12 months because this is a real passion area for me, and I'm very happy to share my thoughts, and I've actually delivered. I'm not just a high-level transformation consultant. I'm a practitioner. I've actually implemented a lot of the things that I believe in this area, and I have strong technology in IT and a really people-based approach and a customer-centric approach to technology and digital change. Nicola, over to you.
Great, thanks, called it. And again, yeah, over 25 years experience in business. And I know you're thinking I surely don't look that old. So, but no, I'm the one of the founder of Custarian. But my background, similar to what called it SEP, actually, my background in business. So it's only 7 years ago that that I formed Custarian with Simon in terms of a practitioner-based consulting business. But prior to that, I worked with large-scale service organisations such as the RAC. Then moved into retail, and in particular distance shopping retail, now online retailing, and logistics. So worked in some multi-sector experience, but worked in large scale operations in both operational roles at a senior level, sort of exec and operating board level, and also commercial and transformation roles. So have also been responsible for IT in my background and former years, and also large scale transformation programs. So yeah, I've been responsible in business, responsible for P&Ls, responsible for either delivering the operation, the commercial benefit, or delivering transformational change. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thanks very much. Let's wait for the slide to change. Well, we're playing how long have I been in business trumps then, aren't we? So I will now put down my 35 years I've been in business. I started off my background with the Kingfisher Group. Broadly, my experience has been centered around data-led marketing, so changing people's behavior through understanding information about them. So a lot of technology used in that, a lot of outsourced experience. I've had time running an agency and I've had time working within mail order. Certainly from my point of view, the last time meaningful I was there, I had responsibility for generating nearly £750 million worth of sales. It's monopoly money when you get up to that level, I think. But certainly throughout most of those roles, I've been lucky to work with some quite innovative companies that were very highly collaborative in their approach to trying to get things done. And I think bringing some of that knowledge to this webinar is something that I'm looking forward to doing.
Thank you, Simon. Digital transformation. I've dropped digital and we put business transformation. Everybody was talking about business transformation a few years ago, and it's all now become digital transformation. It's the same thing in my view, but there's some subtle differences. Digital requires the rapid adoption at a pace of technology, and a technology acting as an enabler for that change. Technology is pervasive everywhere now in a lot of our organizations, and if we didn't have technology, how would we be all working from home as we're doing at the moment?
And I guess the only other one, Simon, is
Geraldine. Sorry, Geraldine.
Into the Freshfields teams. I mean, the sprint plan, obviously we're using this now, so that's done. I have created a folder called Work in Progress document.
I've just muted Geraldine. Sorry, there's just too much noise there. Sorry. As I said, technology is pervasive in our organisation, from infrastructure all the way to our handheld devices. It's become part of the norm in terms of bringing about change, and I think organisations in various sectors and markets are now grasping technology as a way to give them competitive advantage and differentiation. And with remote working and having to work in a hybrid model even going forward, technology is going to act as that catalyst for digital transformation. And I think as we start going back to work and how we work in that kind of hybrid model organizations, so you can see all the market data, the analyst data saying that digital transformation is where organizations and CEOs are investing a lot of time and effort. But it's not easy. Digital transformation is not easy. It's complex. It means many things to many people, and it means different things in different sectors and different contexts. So as we've been embarking on this webinar series, we've really have tried to get some inputs. And one of the things that we'd like you to kick off with is to ask you all a question. And the question is, how do you feel and see happening when there's engagement with digital change? Is it a good experience? Is it a bad experience? What words conjure in your mind when you think about digital change and transformation? And maybe some of them could be a positive one, some of them could be negative feelers. We're going to use Slido as the tool for providing that input from everybody. There's a barcode there, and that will take you straight to the web page, and which is slido.com, and there's a code there, W506, that you can put in to answer that question. And you can put in 1 or 2 words, because what we're going to generate from this is a word cloud that gives the sentimental feeling across the attendees at our webinar at the moment. And I'm just going to switch over to Slido so that everybody can see that in the webinar. So can you see? Okay, people are already on the word cloud, and I can see it. And you can see there's some words flying in as we speak. What do you feel happening when there's poor engagement with digital change? What does it conjure up for you? And please, we've got another Slido poll towards the end of the webinar, so please hold on to your web page and your login, because we're going to ask you to put in another submission a bit later. So Nicola and Simon, I'm wondering if you can pick up on some of these things that we can see.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one about the early warning sign, actually, that projects will fail. Because as you say, I think we've all been there, where we've experienced a project that you've just got a gut feel from the start that because of the engagement that it's going to be an uphill battle, or ultimately it's going to fail. So I think I think that's a really interesting one. I think, as you say, failure, frustration, anarchy. I think anarchy, as you say, is a again interesting behaviour. Risk and rejecting it. I think rejecting it's a good one, because often poor engagement, particularly with workforces that aren't necessarily digitally savvy, if you don't engage those workforces in what's happening from a digital transformation, then they can just reject it because they feel like they've been bypassed, a competition's been bypassed, projects being considered a failure. I think there's been a couple actually costs increase, or actually missing your ROI target, because there's lots of money then that gets wasted on sort of almost digital solutions that have been designed but without good user engagement or user input, have been in some cases a waste of time.
And I think there's quite a few comments in there around needing clarity in the gaps that exist, talking about confusion and silo mentality. And I think these are some of the good things that are to see, where through this series we've come to talk about collaboration and leadership and stakeholder management. So it's good in a way that they're the topics that we've decided to approach in this, because we will be talking about what we see, the good and bad of some of those things as we go. But the interesting one for me, and we do quite a lot of journey type analysis, usually things fail between the gaps in a process. They fail at handover points. They fail at transfer points. They fail as things are coming into organisations are going out. So quite interesting the way some of this is coming over. So
yeah, just the ones I'm picking up: negative culture. There's the stakeholder piece, unhappy stakeholders. Unhappy mature staff members having hesitancy, rejection. Yeah, absolutely. So how many did we have actually vote?
I think the one, sorry, called just
go ahead, Karen.
What somebody actually said, it's IT's fault. Again, having been on the being a receiver of IT services, but equally then owning IT in businesses, it is frustrating sometimes, because as you say, actually it gets blamed on IT when it's not actually anything to do with IT. It's been due to poor engagement in the digital change. But we often want to look for a department or a set of people to blame.
Yeah, and the feeling that I have when I see some of this around blaming IT, it's not the software typically. Sometimes the software gets blamed. It's because it hasn't been implemented correctly, because lo and behold, stakeholders haven't been engaged. There hasn't been co-creation and collaboration going on. and there's lack of clarity on how to roll this out, which are common themes that I always see. Okay, we've had
picnic, as I've heard it termed now, person in chair, not in computer.
Yeah. We have 17. Now this is interesting, and I'm calling out to the attendees. We have 17 inputs, but we have 25 plus attendees. So I would just like to encourage everybody to participate in capturing your thoughts as we go along. So again, remember, as we go along, if you've got any burning questions, you can still use the chat function. We are going to pick them up, but we'll move on. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to move back to our presentation and show you, just bear with me as I share my screen. Give me a second. Can you see my presentation again, Simon, Nicola? Just give me a.
We have, yeah.
Okay, so we've done this kind of survey a number of times. We just wanted to show you the results in a word cloud format that we've done before. Here we had in March, early March, we had 25 participants, respondents, I should say. And look at the things that they said compared to what we've just heard. Resistance to change. Actually, I don't think there's resistance to change. There's usually fear and sometimes hope that the person that's coming in is going to make a change and a difference. Culture change, leadership, and this is, if you look at there's I would say a lot of the things that we heard, the defensiveness, blaming IT, a lot of those things either are repeated here, but that sentiment around what we've heard before is certainly coming across again. Any thoughts, Simon and Nicola?
No, I think we'll probably touch on some. We're certainly going to cover leadership and collaboration and engagement. So I think stakeholder engagement. So I think some of the, as you say, the key ones here that have come out in this word cloud, plus just the participants in terms of some of their inputs. I'm sure we'll cover. If not, ask us the question as we're going through.
Sure. Okay. So the focus of this webinar was to, as we had those poll inputs, and we'll obviously analyze the ones that we had from this one, there was three key themes that emerged that people wanted us to focus in on. And that was leadership, collaboration, and stakeholder management. And those three areas are kind of quite interrelated, very important, but they do set the tone or the behaviors and invariably then the culture of the organization to make the change happen. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to hand over to Nicola to start the ball rolling with the leadership elements, please.
Yeah, and as we say, you know, leadership is key. And what we mean by leadership, it's not the program manager or the agile coach or, you know, the person that in effect is, you know, owning the responsibility of the delivery of the project. It's leadership at the highest level. So, you know, often executive members or certainly delegated to senior leaders. And in a previous poll, it was interesting that 50% of people said that they felt change had failed down to poor leadership. So it just shows, you know, how important that this is to successful change, whether that, as you say, is business transformation or it's digital transformation. So any form of transformation, leadership is key. So in terms of, next slide, please. In terms of just thinking about organizations. So if we think about the organizations, and most organizations now are facing, you know, significant challenges. COVID has brought about significant challenges for a lot of businesses in the last 12 months. And we touched on that in the first webinar about the sort of three types and three archetypes of organizations. I've been involved in, you know, a few businesses where, you know, there was a significant market challenge and there needed to be a fundamental change on the way that the whole basis that the business worked, from its proposition to its technology, to its whole operating model, to the colleague proposition, the customer proposition. So it wasn't just one element of the business that needed to change. It was a whole scale change for that organization to survive and prosper. And some of those full operating model changes were completed in less than 12 12, in 12 months or less. So it wasn't about the fact that it had to happen over years and years and years. The fundamental building blocks of those business operating model changes were completed, as I say, in 12 months or less. However, I have also been involved in businesses or seen businesses where leadership has been the result of change not being effective, and some of the things that can stop it, and we often call them anchors. So it's the things that can hold you down. So if you can imagine, if you're a sailing yacht or a boat, what are the things that are holding you back and stopping you actually moving forward and completing successful transformation? Some of the key points that we've pulled out is that often executives then delegate sponsorship to one of the directorate, so it's almost a delegating full accountability and responsibility, and not taking active sponsorship in something that is required to drive full business transformation. So that can often fail and equally, as I say, prevent or stop change happening effectively. The other reason is for failing to build a compelling need for change. This is back to the not being clear about the purpose. So what's the purpose? What's the problem statement? What are the objectives? What outcomes are we looking for? So what is that burning platform and the compelling need for change? And if people don't create that at a leadership level, for the person who's the sponsor of that change, the sponsor of that program, project, activity, whatever it is, it's again, that can cause failure. The other thing that's, again, we've observed is people keeping projects secret. Now, some things, particularly where there's people impact, you might not be able to go out and tell the whole organization, you know what, we're going to think about doing this, particularly if you're having to close things, whether it's stores, it's distribution centers, it's moving things. So again, it could potentially impact people. It's not about, telling the whole business and unsettling the whole business. But often what happens is they keep projects secret from the key senior leaders or key SMEs, subject matter experts, that actually need to be in the know. And therefore this secret squirrel thing is going on over there, and being shaped and designed by people that don't actually know what should happen. And that's back down to, again, not understanding what the end user needs. Things can happen where, again, you get undermining the project. So whilst the business or the sponsor might be saying it's important, it's business critical, again, they don't sort of deal with senior leaders or leaders within the organization then that are undermining the project. So in effect, there's lots of corridor conversations going on around, it'll never happen. I know they're saying it's important, but I think there's other things that are important, and actually, our attention should be over here. So again, I'm sure we've all sort of experienced or observed that. That can also then lead to creating or allowing a blame culture. So when things do go wrong, and things do, at the end of the day, we don't live in a perfect world, and things won't go quite to plan, or we might not design something quite right, that in effect what happens is we allow or foster a blame culture. So people start to get blamed for things that have gone wrong, rather than creating there should be no fear, and again, we should be almost celebrating some mini failures, because we can learn lessons from it and understand how we can sort of create a better culture going forwards. A couple of last things is routinely briefs against individuals, and what we mean by that is actually almost, again, fostering I know that person's going to get something wrong, or they've got it wrong, or and I don't think they're quite up for this, or it's almost like they're hand picking out people that they know are going to potentially fail. So again, that can start leading to and aligned to the blame culture, can almost start to foster this negativity of being associated and attached to something that's going to drive significant change. And then the last one, just around consultants, a revolving door approach to consultants, and that can be consulting businesses as well as independent or sort of teams of consultants. And whilst, again, sometimes it is time to change consultants, the revolving door approach is often not helpful, and it's the blame the consultants as to why something's failed. So a little bit like blame IT, again, often it can be blame the consultants. What are the engines then? So these are the things that can help, transformations move forward, the things that can really accelerate it. It's having a sponsor that takes a very visible lead on the project. And that sponsor doesn't need to necessarily be the CEO, although the CEO should be very visible within something that is involved in business transformation. But certainly an executive should be a very visible lead on the project or the program. Again, creating a very clear and simple vision of the need and the outcome. Again, we've probably seen, multiple strategy documents where, they're 165 pages long, which are articulating why we should do something. This is about having a simple ambition on a page, or at least a couple of pages, no more, that creates that simple, compelling vision and purpose and the outcomes that we want to deliver, so that everybody can literally see what that North Star is and be aligned to it. They should be supporting the team in public, but counselling in private. So, if somebody's not quite doing things right, or if somebody is struggling, or something, something has gone wrong, they should be supporting the team in a public environment, but then, taking colleagues to one side and giving them counsel or coaching in private, and not doing that in a public environment. They should have enough understanding of the detail, but avoiding stepping in. We've all had the probably the drive-bys and the, I think we should be doing this. So everybody now literally pivots and goes elsewhere. And again, causes diversions. So again, the leader of the program or the project should understand the detail, but, just try and stop to step in and let the team get on with it. But again, could be doing some of that counsel in private. Holds the nerve during difficult periods, and I think particularly COVID has been very testing in terms of leaders holding their nerve, but it's really important again to hold your nerve, particularly where there's significant change underway, and likewise will make tough decisions if it is required and owns them. And I think it's important as well that the collective team understand the permissions. So what authority have they got versus what do they need to go to the sponsor for authority sign off. And then the final one is giving credit to everyone but themselves. So, again, making sure that you are celebrating successes, that they're doing it publicly, really calling out, where people have gone above and beyond, but likewise have delivered something successfully. So, leadership of transformation, whether that's business or digital transformation, is absolutely crucial.
Fantastic, Nicola. That's provoked so many thoughts in my mind, but I'd like the audience to reflect on that and think of any questions any burning questions. Do post them up. We've maybe got one coming in, I think. Hold on. Oh, Simon and Nicola's actually said, please ask questions. Thank you. Please put that in your minds, and we'll move on to the next area or topic, which Simon's now going to cover around collaboration. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Calder, for that. With regards to questions, by the way, anything, it doesn't necessarily need to be on topic that we happen to talk about at that point in time. We will pick it up. With our collective time in the business of 85 years, I think we'll be quite good at being quite fleet on our feet, despite our age, to be able to respond to any questions. So I think for me, when we think about, and the reason these came about is as we went through a number of series of these activities, people went, look, it's always about culture, it's also about frustration, but the things we want to understand that actually help support that and create a more positive culture in terms of what we're doing. One of them was leadership, obviously fundamental effect, shadow of a leader concept that runs through organizations. And then we get to collaboration. So these are things that people have asked about through the series of these. So these are things that if you've got further questions on, do please shout out about. From my point of view, before we move on, I think I'd like to spend a little time and think, so why would collaboration be such an important point? And collaboration gets talked around quite a lot in business today. And I think the reason for it is because we probably came from areas and times when things weren't very collaborative. And I think part of that was a risk approach that had driven up through business. Part of this might be our management practices. We had very much a command and control structure and things. Consequence of getting things wrong could be quite high. We'd come out of an industrial age, and the industrial age was very much hierarchical. So it was, I tell you what to do, you then tell your person what to do. So things get broke down into a series of tasks. And I think the other thing that we probably think, as people start to look for collaboration and driving collaboration in businesses, that task management structure doesn't fit with that. telling people just at a task level what to do doesn't work. What you've got to be really good is talking about the outcomes you're trying to create so that people can go away and collaborate on that. So there is probably feelings within management teams where they just don't know how to quite do this. They're used to telling people what to do, not describing clearly an outcome, and then letting them go and create the outcome. So I just wanted to get that as a frame. So I think it's about moving from a sort of contained workforce model to more of an empowered workforce model. If we go on to the next slide, Calder, then we'll go through it. So again, these are a combination of real world types of things. You know, I've worked with a number of organizations that are facing a product challenge. They may know that the market is narrowing. They may know that their product is coming to the end of its life cycle. They may know that they've got competitors who have probably got better products than them. And what they need to do is think, right, so what do we need to do to innovate the pipeline? And again, a bit like the way in which you've done with Nicola, who had a question come in there. I've just noticed out the corner of my eye, but how Nicola's done it. There is the sort of, and these are not a company's done this in our experience. This is composite of things where you probably don't want to do it this way around, and versus things where you might want to do it this way. So when we look at the things that stop you from delivering that innovation pipeline, it's that perhaps traditional approach. Look, we're marketing, we should do it. We'll get a company in to help us do this. We're going to keep it to C-suite because this is quite important stuff, which usually, to be honest, is more about trying to enhance the prestige of the person who's running a department that is trying to get to a right result. Soaks up a lot of the time. They haven't got time to other stuff. The other stuff gets pushed out into the management teams to try and deal with. So the senior leadership team or the management team start to feel excluded. Then a new product appears. Everybody goes, what on earth are we doing this for? And these are the types of things that do happen in organizations. And what I want to spend time on is this sort of other side of this, where there is a more collaborative approach to it. There's quite a lot of information published that's in the public domain about why collaboration is a good thing. And I think the interesting thing for us to think about before we go into this is we've just come through a period where there's the ability to collaborate has been increased because we're now working from home. We're working from home, which means that we can reach out to people and colleagues. And we've done some work in this environment, and people have talked about the ability to collaborate better, about people feeling they've got a voice where they might not otherwise have a voice. So it's quite an interesting thing to look at the way in which people are working and say, we probably have come into a period that because we're working in hybrid type models, and there is no massive desire to go back to all being in offices, as there is no massive desire to all be staying at home, but that ability to collaborate is probably growing. So the types of things we're talking about now is, look, if you want to think about a collaborative model, think about service design type approaches. Service design has been around for 20 plus years. You can look it up on IDEO. There's a number of people who practice it. We practice service design along with a number of other ways of delivering change. But that's all about high collaboration. It's about pace and collaboration. And what you want to do on there is you need to create what the outcome is you're looking for very clearly. And I think when people think about collaborate, sometimes they think it's about just getting in a room and talking about stuff. It isn't. You need a defined view as to what it is you're trying to create. We're trying to create the next product that could deliver a market advantage for us, and we need to do it within 6 months so that we can gain pace in. You need that start point, and that should underpin the vision that comes out of the leadership. That vision should be taken to the business. It should be taken to suppliers, and it should be taken to customers. We know of a number of instances where people have been brave. They've stepped into supplier networks, which has necessitated them going, look, and to customers, we haven't got a view of what the next product is. We've got a view, we need a product. We haven't got a view of what that product is. And then you work together. You work together in virtual or in real workshops. You follow prescribed methodologies. But the interesting thing about that is you need to bring a wide and diverse range of people into the room. You should not be keeping it to your friends. You should not be keeping it to people who you think will agree with you. You should be openly inviting people in who will challenge. You should definitely not work within silos to do this. And you should welcome views into that room. So that takes a real challenge on people's ability to run workshop type environments or run mentor type environments, but there is a whole lot of good comes out of that. We've had examples of people spotting complete process failures because they've brought people into a room who are further down the supply chain. Customer persona, another great tool for creating collaboration. That's a way of collaborating with your customers, with them virtually. You understand the types of customers you deal with, but you could have supplier personas, you could have colleague personas. You create a product hub. So you put things into a place where people can go and test things. Interesting idea that Kuldip's bringing to the end of this, which is the ability to look and test digital change in a sort of no risk environment, but creating something. So all about collaboration has got some of the really sort of stuff called noddy stuff in it. You do better collaboration by collaborating with people. You do it by doing it in an open way, and you do it by sharing, but with clear goals and with a clear process that underpins it. Then you end up with a series of design activities that you run with blended teams. So you're looking and trying to create the solutions. And then what you do is you end up with product activity or product ideas that have been generated by the business, that they then go back to the people who've kicked off the work to go, well, this is what we think. And these have been co-created by the suppliers, the customers, and the colleagues in the business to a clear mandate that's been driven out of a clear strategy. We've got another question that's come in there from Miguel, by the way. So that to me sums up collaboration. I just want to finish by sort of saying there is a huge benefit that comes out of collaboration. If you're talking about in the context of business transformation or digital transformation, you're talking about taking people and organizations from being sort of quite change averse, quite change orientated. The more you collaborate with people in a business, the more you're exposing them to new ideas and new ways of working. And therefore, the more change orientated you are making them. And it's not untypical for us when we engage with the business to try and deal with 20 to 30% of the colleagues in the business. You're creating a groundswell of people who will not necessarily have been exposed to things and will have been used to running along a day job. It's a really powerful tool, collaboration, to get people into a more change orientated mindset.
I think it was Simon, just to say, Miguel, a point there he's made, he's happy to see the lack of cross-functional collaboration as a main failure. So just recognising that it's so many times driving such a high pressure over the front end and creates burning out to those employees. So as you say, in effect, it's the users that are going to be on the receiving end of business or digital transformation that it often causes those pressure points.
Yeah, great. And there's another bit I'll pick up on that from Miguel, and we can come back to Paul's comments, which is this whole idea that, I mean, there are times when a command and control version of things works, by the way. You know, there are times when you just need to just go and do something. And I think that's used too much. And I think it's because of a lack of management training and capability to be clear about converting a vision into clear outcomes that people can then go and collaborate on, which goes back to, I think, Paul's comment, which is, do you think you need a different type of management? The answer to that is probably sometimes, and I'll see if Kuldip and Nicola have got that.
Yeah,
you certainly need a different catalyst in there somewhere, I think, quite often.
And I think just before I'll come back to Paul's question, actually, because it was a really interesting one around leadership, just Iqbal's asked a question around the idea, the ideal collaboration group should also include a mixture of technical and non-technical team members running an open and supportive. Absolutely. And I think Iqbal, I totally agree with that. Often, and this is again, you know, no disregard to IT or digital teams, but, you know, they're often digitally savvy people. When you bring in, say, working in logistics with utilities businesses, you bring in, and it's not just older generations, but, you know, non-digitally savvy people, and, you know, they're actually really feared of apps or things that are being designed that they know they're going to have to adopt, but, you know, they're going home at night and speaking to the wife, to the husbands, going, oh my god, you know, you should see the latest thing they're asking me to use. So, and it's putting the fear of God in people. So it's really important that you involve all different types of personas, different age groups, different work types. So if you are dealing with people that are out in the field, you know, imagine what it's like when you dig in a big dark hole, you know, that's wet, it's cold, you know, you've got equipment around you, and now you're being asked to tap in something on a mobile or a tablet. So whilst you might have a customer peering down the hole. So, you know, just imagine yourself in those scenarios, but likewise bring people in from other functions. We've often brought people in from support functions, so from the HR teams, from the finance teams, because they also need to see it from the, you know, the customer point of view, from those, certainly those colleagues that are serving end customers, but likewise they can understand the impact on the colleague proposition and also the impact on the cost to serve, or, you know, equally the value that could be created. A couple of other questions, Simon, on collaboration. So do you think collaboration by including diverse groups could lead to delays and confusion?
And I'm really glad that question got asked by Abhijit then, because this is a really interesting area that I think has been opened up by homeworking. the answer to that is some of the best ideas come out of confusion and chaos. They genuinely do. That's why we say it places other challenges on the people who are involved in the business, because quite often the reaction to confusion and chaos is to shut it down and to be quite fearful of it. It can create great ideas, but you've got to know how to manage your way through that process. You've got to know how to bring those people into the room. You've got to know how to allow those ideas to flourish. And quite often it's about going, that was brilliant, and parking it. And then it sort of percolates through later on. The bit I did want to come back to in terms of collaboration, and again, it's just sort of hit it with a hammer all the time, is collaboration means with as many people from as many backgrounds as you can. The thing that I think working from home and therefore being used to working in a more virtual environment is there are people who are on various spectrums. Autism's one that's been very recognized about having really great abilities to break open problems, but can't work within traditional work environments. So collaboration should enable you to collaborate with people who are not currently in your workforce and are not currently in your sort of ideas base. And I think that's a really important thing to try and get people's minds to it. The more people who can contribute to an idea within a structured framework, the better an answer you're likely to get, provided you're used to working in that environment. So it's a big challenge for people, because I think this is quite a big change.
Yeah, and I'll just come back to the question that Paul asked around, do you think transformation programs require a different style of leadership? In other words, are the right people in place from day one? I think, as you said, really interesting question. And I think I've often reflected back on this when I've been working with executive teams and senior leadership teams. And I think, you know, lots of teams, to be fair, or leaders are used to being able, you know, are used to programs where it's been planned and we plan it for ages and we know the nth degree of what we think on an Excel spreadsheet or a program plan. We then tell them, we then task them, we then chase them, we then deliver them, and then we then train them. So it's all been very rigid and very done to. What we're doing now is suggesting, you know, certainly from a digital transformation point of view, back to what Simon said, it should be collaborative, it should be involving, it should be adaptive. So no, I can't tell you what we're going to do in you know, week 67 on day 5, because we don't know until we get to there. So, and a lot of people can't cope actually with that. We're going to adapt as we go. Of course, we still have a clear purpose and we've got very clear outcomes, but I can't tell you what we're going to do in week 67. It does require people that are nurturing, coaching, you know, actually being able to work at pace with a little bit of uncertainty, and equally, you know, some things will go wrong, so not having a fear of failure, but you know, knowing again how to coach people through it, and you know, be clear about the purpose of the project or the program or the business transformation. So I think, yes, Paul, it does require sort of different skills, not whole scale change, but certainly a different shape and a different makeup of those leadership skills.
I'm gonna fly in here, Nicola, just to add a little bit, and just reflecting back on our previous webinars. We were talking about we're living in a world of constant change, and we need a change mentality, a mindset around continual change. And I think the mindset leadership really needs to be adopting is that long gone are the 5-year strategies, 3-year visions. Things change every few months. There's always a new app, a new technology trend that's appearing, and we've got to be, as you said, be able to pivot and be adaptable to that change. And you know, COVID has forced us into a type of change. So in relation to Paul's question, I think there's a mindset shift that we need from our leaders to be adapting to change in a constant way, and therefore bringing, and the other part of that is the digital enablement or empowerment. It's not so command, you know, you described to me what I saw was a command and control kind of structure. Absolutely. But now I think there's more of a coaching, guiding, mentoring, and letting people fail and learn from that failure. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
And I think, in fact, we talked previously, actually, I think we came up with, you almost need to let people unleash a little bit, you know, let them blurt out it doesn't work because of this, and you know, just let them unleash. In fairness, that you let them, you know, almost unfold their anchors, let them unlearn. So I think there's lots of unlearning before we can unlock, you know, the potential going forward. So I think, you know, some of the say, almost unleashing and unlearning is as important as you say, the engines and moving forward. So yeah, more servant leadership, absolutely.
Absolutely. And just picking on Simon Robinson's comment, ironically, the generation fearful of apps are the generation that introduced that great tool called Excel spreadsheets.
Absolutely. There's one parting comment I'd make on this bit before we move on, by the way, and that is this whole sort of idea that people are behaviorally programmed to try and keep themselves safe. And keeping themselves safe means doing what we've always done. So to go right back to that first question that kicked us off from Paul's is, unless you've got a leadership in, and that leadership's the thing that's initiated the change, and that leadership's come from a transformation background, then you may well have a leadership that's predefined to try and keep things safe. So they may say it because the boards or the cities demanded they go and put digital transformation in, but what they're doing is secretly, subconsciously, and obviously unknowingly, fighting at every turn as they go, because behaviorally they just want it all to stay the same and wish it would just go away.
And one of the questions I always get posed, and I've been thinking about this a long time, people say to me, well, if the CEO is resistant to change, he wants to keep it the same and he's the king and in charge. Well, yes, he is probably resistant to change. He's only resistant to change because he fears something. He fears an impact on his role and the gender that he might have. And he needs to understand that there's a change that needs to happen, because his business in his sector will fail, because the ones that are driving, becoming digitally savvy, are the ones that are growing, becoming online, engaging customers in a different way. And that leadership shift needs to recognize that they're acting as an impediment maybe to the organization.
Absolutely. And as you say, often what can you do to help them to unblock that?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I think I'll go on to my section. And my section is around stakeholder management. And actually, I'm going to thank Nicola and Simon for letting me go last on this bit, because it actually allows me to talk about a lot of the things that we've already addressed in a way. The scenario that I put together here was when a new kind of CIO or a chief digital officer gets recruited. He's been around for a long time in the industry, and he recognizes there's a massive challenge with the legacy infrastructure estate. There's a lot of backlog of in-flight and new mandates for new projects, and a digital change is being talked about. And importantly, there's a real need to build a reputation of IT. And the reason I chose this scenario is these are the scenarios that I end up going into. This is the lead role that I've done on a number of occasions. And to pick up on some of the anchors, the things that stop, and some of the things that you can accelerate, can accelerate that journey for change. I would really encourage the audience and people who see this scenario to think about actually going into a listening mode rather than going into an action mode straight away, where you get into this command and control structure and say, I'm here, I'm going to solve all the world's problems. Actually, what you really need to do is listen to the customers, listen to your stakeholders, listen to the business, understand the business needs and the priorities, spend time with your team, listening to them, understand what has worked, hasn't worked in the organization, and go into a kind of learning and reflection mode before you do take action. Because if you start announcing a whole bunch of projects are on hold while we do an internal review, that can create a significant uncertainty and a climate of fear. And people start looking about, thinking about, well, how do they fit into the future organization, where it should be done in a paced, measured way. I've seen organizations where they start a new CDIO will come in, and he'll start bringing in suppliers and partners that he's worked with before because he knows them very well. That can really cause significant issues around buy-in and support. I've also seen other cases where there's suddenly a governance mechanism appears where all IT projects are going to be run through a committee, and suddenly IT are leading the digital transformation agenda. Actually, digital transformation should be led by the business with IT supporting it, not the other way around, right? And secondly, I've seen scenarios where the leaders come in and he started to increase his control by having a whole new set of reporting lines, which is all about command and control and divide and conquer. And then suddenly a three-year enablement program appears, a strategy appears from the back locker, and it gets distributed to everybody. This is what we're going to do. And those anchors can be very disruptive in a digital transformation environment. Whereas I think some of the engines, again, back to the listening, building cross-functional, we talked about cross-functional teams. I absolutely believe in working in many of our organizations are matrix orientated, where they've got their home in various technical functions, but projects and products are developed cross-functionally in a horizontal, and that's where that mixing, I think Iqbal mentioned this, having non-technical and technical people, some might be process focused, might be HR or admin or procurement, mixing those teams to get the different lenses of the challenge and the outcome they're trying to achieve, and that cross-functional teams is really important to build in the understanding of what the transformation and digital requirements are. And then clarity around what we're going to deliver, how and when, but that can emerge from that engagement. And the centerpiece around all this, if you compare the anchors and the engine, is understanding who your stakeholders are, be they at C-suite level in your department, across departments, and spending time to, a lot of people will be familiar with the stakeholder map around power and interest, is understanding who does what, when, and how you need to engage, and how you need to communicate, and how you need to push those messages to the right groups at the right time. And I see that, if you think about, let's give an example, in this environment, you're trying to, roll out a new ERP system. Well, if you haven't told senior people or junior people or end users what's coming, then obviously the barriers go up straight away. It's the fear of the unknown, what's coming. And I just wanted to kind of bring that message across in the stakeholder piece. And I hope that resonates for a lot of people who've worked in this environment, because I see this again and again and again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any thoughts there, Nicola or Simon?
Yeah, I think it leads on nicely actually to, I think, what we're going to come on to about, are you prepared then, and what does that, I think leading on to what does that blueprint start to look like? So, as you say, sort of some thoughts around getting ready and sort of considerations to improve. So I think if you can move on, called it. Yeah, so are you prepared? And it's not easy. Often you'll hear the, oh, it's so complex. Well, it probably is complex, but equally, how do you break that complexity down? And we've all heard the analogy, you can't eat the elephant, in one whole bite. What we need to do is break it down. And often, again, we see that people don't actually fully understand where you are. And I think that links nicely, called it, to what you were saying around understanding your stakeholders. Again, having a map, having the best plan in the world, but route plan in terms of how you're going to get there, is it almost irrelevant if you don't actually know where you are, nor understand what are some of the key issues, what are the outcomes you're looking for, what do your stakeholders want. I've been involved with businesses where they've said, well, we're going to deliver this new digital app for customers because we want them to self-serve. And often my question is, so what do the customers think? What are their wants? What are their needs? What have you equally asked them what they don't want? because you could end up designing something that they don't want and therefore won't adopt it, and then you'll be sat there wondering why your conversion rates are low. So, you know, it's important to understand where you are. So some of the key building blocks and key sort of blueprints for making sure you are prepared for digital transformation is about understanding what are we doing, what's the transformation planning, and what's the ideation. So yes, what is our plan? What's our approach? What's our roadmap? How are we going to ideate? So in effect, are we going to pay prototype? Where are we going to gather ideas from, gather suggestions from the business, from stakeholders, from suppliers, from customers? How are we scoping it? And then what does the design and the architecture look like? But as I say, it's important to understand where you are now before you start mapping out where you want to go. We've touched on leadership. You know, do you have the right transformational leadership in place? Have you got the right sponsor? Have you got the right owner, as well as people as part of that transformation leadership team? It's about understanding, you know, what are the benefits that you need to deliver? What is the return on investment? Equally, what are expectations of people within the organization? And again, that's where the stakeholder map is key, because it's understanding their expectations of what it's going to deliver and what does good look like. Often people might have, you know, hidden expectations and they think it's going to be like this. Well, again, it's often good to draw those out to understand where are you now, but what's your expectation of where we should be? Understanding your customer needs I've touched on, but equally any other external factors or market factors. So that could be, you know, a supplier needs, it could be partner needs, it could be, you know, IT business needs. So how do we then go about the transformation delivery, the implementation and the adoption? So that builds on what Simon was talking around the collaboration, but it's also about delivery and supplier management. How are we going to solution things? But equally, how are we also going to report on successes or report on failures? So what do the objectives look like? What do the key results look like? And how are we going to serve that information up to the business? So again, it's important, you know, is it stuff that needs to be real time? Does it need to be near time? You know, can it be historical? Does it need to be predictive? You know, again, understand and design what that transformation delivery, implementation and adoption should look like. And then finally, and a really important part, and that came out in the word cloud at the start around why changes fail, is the whole cultural aspect. So it's understanding what the target operating model, you know, is not just the now, but what's it going to look like in the future, and then start engaging people in that target operating model. It's about understanding the cultural impacts. So, you know, if you have got people in the organization that are likely to be blockers, then what can you do to overcome that? If you've got people that are really going to be the shapers, you know, the influencers, you know, the people that are going to run with it, you know, those that are going to help you, you know, with the engines, move it forward, then again, identify the people in the organization that can do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean exactly the people that are inside the transformation program. Those could be key players and key stakeholders in the wider organization. The whole communications plan is absolutely crucial. So it's about not hiding information, keeping people in the dark. It's about taking them on the journey. So how can you build excitement, encouragement, involvement, you know, so that people are actually looking forward to the change rather than, you know, fearing the change or almost, you know, hoping it'll all go away. So how do you, you know, build that active communication and involving communication plan where people feel excited to be part of it? And then also understanding the capabilities. So what are the capabilities that you require from, again, both not just the transformation, but the capabilities of the users that are going to be receiving those changes, because there may be different capabilities going forwards, particularly where, you know, digital adoption is key. Again, shaping that out and starting to work with, you know, training teams, with HR teams, with leaders to understand, you know, the changes to capabilities, and again, the journey that you need to take colleagues on in terms of those changes. So that's just as I say, a quick roadmap in terms of the blueprint for what getting prepared and delivering a successful transformation.
That's a great list there, Nicola, and fantastic. I just wanted to kind of build on that. The statement that's right at the top of this slide, which says, if you don't know where you are, having a map doesn't really help. And a lot of organizations start their journey by doing some kind of current state readiness assessment. But what we've done is we've developed something a little bit non-intrusive. We've developed a gamification platform that helps organizations understand what could be the impact of certain strategic and operational plays. And this platform allows you to play out those strategic maneuvers in a safe environment to understand if we did X, Y, and Z from a technology and a business perspective, this is the impact it will have on customer experience, revenue, and profitability. And it helps organizations understand what I need to do to make my environment stable. How do I make my environment more agile, responsive to new needs and new features and new capabilities I want to bring to the market? And wouldn't it be great to see what the future could look like and the results of that, or those decisions, before you actually make them? So what this is a low cost gamification simulation training that we've now brought to market, that we do in a virtual single player, and you play out a certain airline effectively in a business and context and market context in a safe environment. And it's a low cost option to bring your teams together to think about how to break down silos, enhance the communication, the collaboration, understand what your stakeholders might be feeling like from a different perspectives. And we've successfully we've launched it, piloted, and we're now actually have delivered it to at least 3 or 4 clients. And if anybody's interested, we'd love to hear from you. Enough of my marketing and selling skills. I'm going to hand over to Simon.
Great. I think Joe's actually posted a question just saying slides are great, agree with every point on them. Fantastic, thanks Joe. But it takes a brave project manager to say, hang on, we're not ready to start yet. It absolutely does. I think, but this is back to again, it's the sponsor and the leader's responsibility, along with the project manager, also to recognize when, actually we need to do some more discovery. We need to do some more, stakeholder mapping. We need to do some more, actually understand the wants and needs of the users. So, it is really important, as you say, that it's not the project manager's responsibility, really. It's down to the leader and the sponsor to be aware of that and equally to support it. One of the things that can work often, and we've just actually tried this with a recent client, is actually presenting if you don't do something, what's going to happen, and potentially what the business case could look like. And also if it went wrong, again, what could happen. So I would imagine some of your simulation software there, called IP, and what you started to build could actually simulate some of those scenarios as well, because I think that might be able to help, as you say, project managers in their roles going forward.
Yeah, it tackles the why question and having a purpose. It will bring out, if you don't have a purpose, you shouldn't be moving forward. And you're right, it requires a brave project manager, a brave program manager, a brave portfolio manager, a brave senior leader to call that out. And we should be, absolutely. I'm going to, as Simon has put up in the chat function, we're going to do another Slido poll to gather your thoughts on what you would like to hear about next before we go into a Q&A session. So back to the Slido, you have the barcode there, and hopefully you still got the app open. We'd really like to get your feedback on what other topics would be of interest to you. And hopefully the 3 areas we covered maybe have triggered thoughts on other areas that you might want us to pick up on. And we're very happy to do that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and flip back to the poll. And hopefully you can see my screen in any second.
And just while Coldip's doing that, we'll pick them up now. But equally for another webinar as well. So it's not something that you want an immediate, if you do want an immediate answer, feel free to, but this is sort of other subject areas or other topics, or a repeat of anything that we've talked about through today? Would be interesting for us to know. Don't be shy, as the saying goes. While just having a think about it, there's one from me, I think, in reflection to what Joe said there, and I think both Culdip and Nicola have talked about it. For me, if there is a project manager sat there going, I'm going to have to be brave and call this out, then right at the start was a discussion about early sign of failure. I think, you know, if it is driven that level of nervousness, then you're probably into a situation where that program's already heading towards some level of failure. Because to be honest, there should be no feeling for a project manager to think that they're owning and responsible for the project. They're responsible for delivering a part of it, just like IT aren't responsible for digital change. These are business level issues that should have that level of focus on them. And equally, there should be some level of clear governance which enables these types of things to be floated so that they don't become a massive issue and a massive problem. And within all the discussion around collaboration and good stakeholder management and digital, there's always this impression that this is all very agile. But agile sits within a very well-governed framework as far as we're concerned. It does need things that say things can be called out, things can be sent up to the top of the chain. These things shouldn't come as a surprise. So I think that's an important point to say. If you're finding yourself in that position of being isolated and feeling you're going to get shot for making this claim, then you're probably in a project that's probably already on its way to failure. It'd be interesting if Culdip or Nicola will get any thoughts to that. We're now loading the slide up, though. We've got 8. Get some more, it'd be brilliant. So.
Yeah, there's some interesting thoughts here. And because this is coming through as a cloud, if people feel that one of the topics there is what they want to hear again, so if they choose the same word, the actual word will, you know, get exaggerated in terms of its font size. So it'll stand out further above and beyond the others. It's interesting. Digital transformation using Salesforce. Well, my experience with Salesforce is it's very expensive, but you know, maybe that's a time for a different discussion. Technology platforms, I agree. I'm going to be talking about technology and digital platforms in May.
I think that the leadership through recovering from a failing transformation, I think that's a really interesting one. And again, we'll have all been in businesses where something has failed, and it takes a strong leader equally to pull the plug on something when you're multi-million pounds down the line.
It's a great point, Nicola. Sorry, go on, Tom.
No, that comment, that input from a business executive who was in the 20% of orgs that have been successful in transformation. You've got one of them on this, by the way. It isn't me. I'll give you a clue. But you have got somebody, maybe a couple of years ago, but was part of one of the largest transformations that happened within a retail organisation in the UK, a shift from 15% online to 85% online, including a complete transformation of its entire business and way of working. So yeah, certainly we could come back on that one. And the retail one's an interesting one for me because I'm a retail person by heart, by the way. And I think the interesting one for retail is they work on incredibly tight margins, yet a lot of people think that these are companies that are at the bleeding edge of innovation. You can learn lessons from retail. It is a very hard-fought environment. Both myself and Nicola have come from it. That's an interesting one. In terms of what they do, but they do stuff, you know, very much on the knife edge in terms of margin and profitability quite often. So,
yeah, digital transformation, higher education. Now you've got me going. Now that's in a sector that needs radical change for various reasons, and culture plays a big part in aiding or inhibiting. In HE.
Yeah, there's probably some synergies with local authorities as well. Yeah, we've done some work with local authorities as well around digital transformation.
Yeah, I mean, I was on a panel actually where there's quite a lot of higher education professionals on there, and they were talking about how it's the mandated framework they have to work within fails continually on this. Just simple things like you're not allowed to use digital products in a teaching environment. And the assumption that the kids are going to be very digitally enabled and empowered when they're not, and they're not allowed to deal with that, focus on the sort of core components of education. It's a really interesting area to try and get into as well, full of little mini minefields and policy decisions, I think. So,
yeah, I was on a call with a Russell Group University this morning, and they said to me they are having to transform. It's not a case of wanting, it's a case of we're now looking at our estate. We're thinking of the hybrid delivery model of what courses and teaching they can provide remotely compared to what actually needs to happen on campus, and they're putting a lot of effort into that digital transformation. And it's something that we could probably, we'll confer afterwards, but it's something that I think we could talk very knowledgeably about, I think all of us.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting one on there for me, and I think we'll probably move to close shortly. But dealing with legacy has always been a real issue for me, because we deal a lot in service sectors, and service sectors are incredibly cost-driven whilst talking about creating experience. I think there's a lot within IT, and Calder will be up to his knees in this, where they are dealing with legacy. But I think there's an interesting one on legacy for me, because quite often what goes with legacy systems, and these are wider than IT, is just legacy working practices and legacy ways of thinking and legacy ways of dealing with risk. And there's this whole thing about the way in which legacy fights against transformation all of the time. That's quite an interesting topic, I think.
And for the technically focused people on the legacy side, it's usually systems and applications that have been developed donkeys years ago. There's lots of redundant code in there. The people that coded it aren't around anymore. How do we maintain them? How do we move to a low code, no code environment? How do you decommission stuff? And how do we integrate systems? There's a whole piece there as well that we could talk about. But I'm conscious of the time.
Yeah,
and Simon, I know that we wanted to wrap up with, I'm just switching back to my slides.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, I mean, we said we don't want to take time off people, and it's 1:15. I just think whether there was any one last thought from each of us as we go around. I'm going to start with Nicola whilst you unzip the slide, and just say as a last thought from you. And if anybody wants to quickly fire a question in, we will pick it up as well. But if there's a last thought from you, Nicola, on listening to that, reflecting back on leadership as to what would be the main strength you've seen in a leader that impressed you, that you thought's enduring.
I think for me, I think it's having some humility, because as a leader, and having been there as an exec leader and a senior leader, we haven't got all the answers either, and we don't know. Actually, we're going home at night feared of failure, and and there's lots of execs and senior leaders that are in the same boat. But I think if you could just operate with a bit more humility and understanding, and actually also admit when, look, I haven't got all the answers, and therefore I do want to come to the team, to do more collaboration. So I think pulling in what you talked about, Simon, I think just that whole piece around leadership is, it does need to change and evolve, but likewise, senior leaders are humans, and probably just operating with a little bit more humility through transformations is often, I think, quite endearing to the people that are involved in it.
Great. And a similar question to you, Calder. I think just one last thought you'd like to leave out of, the real thing that you think is important about stakeholder management, or any last thought that's been occurring to you.
I think there's a number of things, but I'll try to keep it brief. Don't work in isolation. Don't work alone. A tendency of people to go and do their work in their own private way. Know who your end users are, who your customers are, externally and internally. Engage. The more you give and more you communicate, the more you de-risk the business, the less the fear of the change, and that requires just constant iterative change for me. And there's a comment that came up with Simon Robinson. Let's put up there, and I just wanted to reflect on that. When COVID-19 hit, organizations, and we've talked about this in our previous webinars, things just had to be done. Governance disappeared in many ways. People coalesced in teams, and it was done in an iterative, agile way. Why can't we continue with that modus operandi? As long as we know the purpose and the strategy of what we're trying to achieve, there was a looseness about what we did. And hopefully the tendency isn't, as we go back into offices and go back into work, that we go back to our old command and control pieces. And that's something that, and I'm trying to keep this brief, Simon. It's something that's really passionate about for me. Sorry, back to you.
It's all right, good, because I'll do another sort of leap off Simon's. I'd written down that we probably want to learn the lesson from COVID. Interestingly, COVID, and the bit it didn't allow in quite a lot of times was, yes, it created collaboration, but it was one of these situations where it was pretty clear that the issue was significant, the answer to it was required quickly, and it could be mission critical and business threatening. So stuff was pushed through, but what it's done is pushed us into an environment where we are used to working in a much more collaborative way. And we have got tools, however frustrating we get about the various Zoom type tools that we use, we have got the ability to reach into wider audiences and deal with wider people. And people have found the voice in these platforms. That's a really interesting one, Simon said. My genuine feeling from a behavioural point of view is 12 months is long enough for new behaviours to get bedded in. So if you're speaking as that from a behaviouralist, things won't go back to how they were, but there is a big risk people will try and shove it back to some version of it. However, coming the other way, people have sold parts of their estate off and they haven't got offices for enough people to get into. But I think to try and learn the lessons from what we've done, which is increase the ability to collaborate and increase the ease with which we can collaborate broader than with the people who happen to be sat near us at work. That's a really important point for me, because collaboration, I'll just keep hammering this, when people go, well, who do you mean with? You mean anybody who you think might be able to have a view on something. Unless you're building nuclear power stations, then usually people have a point of view if you're delivering a solution or developing a service. And that to me is an important thing. But I do echo that point that Simon's making, which is, we've been through a piece of enormous change, but let's not sit on our laurels. Let's grasp what was good about it and keep hold of it.
Absolutely.
There you go.
I think we'd love to take more questions, and I know we could carry on, but I think we've got to put it. We've gone past an hour 15. I just want to thank everybody that's helped put this together. There's been a lot of work in the background. Dan Carlick, who's from Costerian, has done a lot of hard work. Nicholas, Simon, and importantly for you, the attendees, to give us an hour and 15 of your time wherever you might be. I just want to thank you, and we will be definitely thinking about what the next one will be.
Brilliant.
So thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time.
Bye.
Bye.